Podtacular episode 384, Cryptum discussion for July 25th, 2013. Hello everyone, welcome to Podtacular, the unofficial Halo Universe podcast. I'm your host, Duststorm, and this week we are doing our first show within our book coverage series, and we're starting off with Cryptum. I have quite the panel of guests on with me tonight to help cover this. Starting off with CruelLEGACEY. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you for having me. Great to be back.
It's great to have you back on the show. I believe last time you were on, we were covering your Playtime stuff.
Yeah, we were doing
the Playtime live stream.
That's right. Yeah, that was a ton of fun.
That was 2.5 hours of awesomeness, guys. We did not get a chance to see that.
I watch it every day.
Oh, do you now?
Yeah.
A little self-indulgence every now and then, huh?
Absolutely.
Alright. Next up in the hot seat is Ian from Xbox. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on. This is your first time on Podtacular.
Yes.
Cool.
I was trying to figure that out earlier today, and somewhere along the way I've lost track of what podcasts I've been on.
Well, we had, I believe we had Major Nelson on very, very early within Podtacular's history. I believe it was either episode 8 or episode 9.
Wow.
Back when Fumo and Spellcheck were doing the show. So we've had, I guess you would be the second Xbox employee to be on the show, believe it or not.
That's a long gap.
That is a long gap. Hopefully the next gap will not be as long.
From episode 8 or 9 to 384.
Yeah. We like to use our Xbox resources very sparingly around here, apparently.
Well, if you can chase me down, I'd be willing to come on at least, once a year. So.
Okay. We'll work something out. But since you're new to the show, we will have a slight interview with you after we introduce our final guest for the night. And you guys have heard him on here very often whenever we've talked lore stuff. So he's back for our first book discussion, and he is Bryan Newman.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going pretty well. Last time you were on, I think it was our podcast right after the launch of Halo 4, where we talked about the campaign.
Sounds about right.
So that was an interesting episode, if I do recall.
Yeah, it was really good. We got some cool lore talk in there.
So, first things first, since E is a new guest on the show, it's customary to do a little bit intro. So most people probably know who you are, E, but why don't you go ahead and give a little bit of background on what it is you do with Xbox and how you got started in the gaming industry and got to where you are now.
Sure. So I have been working on Xbox Live since spring of 2001. So I joined about 6 months before the launch of the original Xbox console, about a year and a half before the launch of Xbox Live. And I have been on the Xbox Live operations team ever since. So I've had a bunch of different jobs along the way. What I do now, my official title is Gaming Ninja. What I really am is an architect. And I spend most of my time trying to make sure that when games launch, that they launch successfully, so that whether it's Halo 4 or Call of Duty or Titanfall, whatever the game is, that the first 24 hours, the first weekend are really crazy because you're going from 0 people playing the game to millions of people playing the game simultaneously. And you wind up, unfortunately, with a lot of games that don't survive that process because it's next to impossible to simulate going from 0 to 1.6 million in 4 hours. So I work with game developers to make sure that we jointly have successful launches. So that means, like the night Halo 4 launched, I was at 343 working with their services teams, making sure it was a smooth launch. The night that Call of Duty launches, I'm up at Demonware helping them, et cetera, et cetera. So what is that? 12 years at Xbox Live now, I guess. And before that, I was actually not in the gaming industry. I was kind of a traditional IT geek. I was working at Microsoft in Microsoft Consulting Services. And I basically worked with large companies like hospitals and utilities and banks to adopt Microsoft software. They'd come in and they'd buy, $10 million worth of software, and then someone like me would come along to help them use it. And it just so happened that I was a gamer when it leaked that Microsoft was going to get into the console gaming business, and I basically beat on people's doors for about 6 months until I found a job.
Still, it sounds like you landed a pretty good job at Xbox. I mean, being there for 12 years, that's quite a commitment.
Yeah, I love it. Honestly, Xbox Live is kind of one of my children. Leaving here and going to work somewhere else would be like giving up a kid for adoption. Okay, I'm not going to be your dad anymore. Someone else is going to do this now. I can't imagine not being here after how much I've poured into this service. I was lucky enough to get the first gamer tag on Live. So my gamer tag is E. And the reason I've got the first gamer tag is there were only a couple of us in the room when we turned it on. And I had seniority and kind of shoved everybody out of the way. But, how many times in my career am I going to get to be in on something as cool as Xbox Live from the beginning? Probably once. I am not ready for that to end.
Yeah. So, well, I think I can speak to the rest of us. We're very happy to have you as part of the Xbox team. So,
thank you.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, not to go off on a tangent, but I'm just sitting here trying to absorb the fact that Xbox Live has been around for 12 years already. And what a huge, not overstating it, it's been a huge part of my life in the past 12 years. That's a big part of what I've done with my spare time, and then moving into more than just my spare time in recent years. It's huge, and very, very cool. To have someone like you who's and I'm sure others on your team as well who've put so much complete dedication behind it through and through from start to where we are now. So yeah, that's fantastic.
It is really crazy. I mean, it's kind of, I know it's definitely shaped a lot of the decisions I've made. It's, it kind of it's affected, who I'm friends with, what I'm trying to do as a career. Xbox Live is a really, really amazing thing. It's pretty cool.
I just looked at the date in the bottom right corner of my laptop, of the screen, and I realized in less than 3 weeks, my gamer tag is going to turn 11, which is kind of scary.
Yeah.
It just doesn't. It feels like it's been, I don't know, a few years at most. I don't know where the time has gone.
It's gone to some pretty cool places, I'll tell you that much, with all the stuff that Xbox come out with. Speaking of how old things are, tomorrow is actually Podtacular's 8th anniversary.
Wow.
Congratulations.
So we have been on the air for 8 years. I've been on it for about 4 years, 9 months now. So it's been a wild ride for us. I know the podcast started shortly after Halo 2 launched. So it's been a crazy ride.
Just think about how many podcasts have come and gone in that time.
I know, so many.
Yeah.
So many podcasts. EU also part of another podcast that's gaming related, the Major Nelson Radio. Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
So I bet a lot of your listeners at least know of Larry and our podcast, Major Nelson Radio. Larry started doing that in 2004, and I have been guest hosting with him since 2005. So I have no idea how many podcasts that is, hundreds. We try to do them every week, although we've missed the last couple of weeks because I was in Austin, and then he was in Russia, and then I was in Australia, and then he was in San Diego.
Yeah, the summertime of conferences does not bode well to podcasting.
Yeah, we actually just recorded one earlier today, so there will be a new episode tomorrow for the first time in a couple of weeks. But yeah, it's been, I mean, I guess one of the really strange effects that Xbox Live has had on my life. Before I worked on this project, I was your typical IT guy in the back room that, never talked to anyone. Twitter didn't exist. And now I do podcasts and panels at PAX, and it's crazy. All because of I love to play video games.
Right on. All right. First order of business for us to get into today is the bulletin. We are going to talk about Cryptum here in a little bit, but of course we need to catch you up on this week's news. So if you guys didn't know, 343 Industries was in full force at San Diego Comic-Con this weekend. They had a panel which talked about some of the stuff that went into the behind the scenes of Halo Spartan Assault, which is now available on Windows 8 platforms, and a little bit into Halo Initiation. It's the comic from Dark Horse. So if you were at San Diego Comic-Con and you went to go see the panel, you got some insight into the process on how that game was made and why they did some of the things that they did, especially the top-down shooter aspect. They said during the panel that they just went into Reach, messed around in theater, and had the camera up there, and they decided that's what they wanted for their view preference. So there's something as simple as that, kind of setting a game feature is quite interesting. But if you haven't watched the video, they do link it on the bulletin, so definitely go over and check that out. They also had tournaments going on Friday and Saturday evening where you could win some cool prizes, one of which was one of the Windows Nokia phones, which I'm a little jealous of.
Yeah, seriously.
Which one?
It was one of the Nokia ones. I forget what the model was.
I've got a 920. I love it.
I've been drooling over those for quite some time.
I'm guessing whatever the latest version of the Nokias are is probably what they got.
For people who are in the chat, I posted that link with the picture of my dog. That's actually, that photo is taken with my Nokia camera phone.
Seriously?
Yeah, it looks like it's off a DSLR, but I took that with Nokia 920.
Yeah, the 1020 is already starting to get some frighteningly good reviews, in particular regarding its camera. So Nokia seems to have it down when it comes down to the cameras on their phones.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to upgrading as soon as I can get my hands on one of those.
The only thing that is still deterring me away from getting a Windows Phone is lack of keyboard.
The physical keyboard?
Yeah.
God, I haven't had one of those on a phone in a few years.
Yeah. I love my Droid 4 right now because of the keyboard. It's so much easier to type than having to hit those soft keys. It's so much faster for me, too.
I felt the same way up until I made the switch, and then I didn't care anymore. Because there was a time when I was the same way, and I had an old Windows Mobile 7 phone that I really, really liked, an HTC with a physical keyboard. And then I finally made the switch, and this was a long time ago because I went from that to an iPhone 3G. And I've not had a physical keyboard on a phone since, and I would not go back now.
All right. I've messed around with the iPhone keyboard because that's my work phone is an iPhone, and the keyboard actually works well on that. But for the Droid, it just sucks. And with all the kind of the power use stuff I do on phones, iPhone doesn't have all the apps or the features that I would be looking for in how I use my phone. So I haven't quite made the switch yet to anything else. I might look into a Windows Phone down the line later. I really want a Surface, but the high price point for the Surface Pro just kind of is not enticing at the moment.
It all depends on what you're going to use it for. I bought myself a Surface Pro for home, and it is now my only PC I use at home or when I'm not working. I do, Twitter, Facebook, email, all that kind of stuff on it. I play Civ 5 on it. I take it on trips. I read comics on it. I love it. But it's a laptop replacement for me, not just a tablet.
Yeah.
The fact that it's a less than 3-pound device that plays my Steam games like Civ 5. Yeah. So I can go on a trip. I can take my Surface Pro and my Kindle. Between the two of them, they're only 3 pounds, and I'm good. I don't really need anything else.
So is the graphics really good on those then?
The screen is gorgeous. It's 1920 by 1080, great blacks, looks fantastic, like watching movies or reading comics and comicsology. It doesn't have a big beefy GPU because it would have to be, you'd have to figure out how to fit a big ass fan in there if you did that.
Yeah.
So you're not going to play, shooters and stuff on it, but for games like Civ 5, it's fantastic.
Interesting.
I've got the RT and I love it for what it is. I'm drooling over the pros myself because I'm curious to see how it would handle some of the sort of just 2D art programs and things like that, paint programs with the touch screen and everything. So maybe someday in my future.
Maybe I just need to get my hands on one and then just try it out.
There's a freebie painting program in the store, Fresh Paint. It's the one that's in the Surface TV ads, and it's actually pretty fun.
I'll have to check that out.
I'm all like iPad and iPhone and all that stuff at the moment. So. I'm on.
Okay. I'm gonna have to. I guess having to get my hands on one might convince me otherwise. But
I played some.
Because I know for the Droid keyboard, the soft touch, it sucks, and swipe for me does not work.
Right.
So maybe the Windows 8 keyboards are like the iOS ones and actually work really well.
Well, as far as the Surface is concerned, one of the reasons that I love it is that the fact that there's that keyboard built into the cover. And I use the tight keyboard, which is not the membrane one, but the one with actual keys that really move. And that's fantastic.
Yeah, those are incredible.
So
I've got both myself and both covers, and yeah, the tight keyboard just works like a dream.
Alrighty then.
By the way, Dustin, in case you hadn't noticed, I will ramble if you let me. So.
I'm aware.
Okay.
There's several people that we've had on the show that will ramble.
You came to the right place.
Yeah, you've came to the perfect place.
Is that a shot at me?
Back to the bulletin. I mean, it was Windows 8 related, so it's closely related to this. There was two different kinds of tournaments. The first one was for Ricochet, so they had a tournament showing off the new game type, which looks sick. Are you guys looking forward to Ricochet?
I'm looking forward to trying it. Yeah.
I'm more of a just team deathmatch kind of person myself.
Sticking with the Slayer.
Honestly, I'm looking forward to
Slayer.
it. That's looking forward.
The concept looks really cool. I like having the scoring feature just kind of added in towards like a Slayer or objective map and kind of meshing that in with Griffball a little bit.
I'm really looking forward to playing the pit, and whenever the inevitable legendary Slayer update is that gives you a battle rifle at start, then life will be perfect. It'll be just can't wait.
You know what I'm the most excited about is seeing what Pete the Duck comes up with the new game type settings. Because I just know he's going to do some really, really fun, amazing maps and game types.
That would be quite interesting.
He's brilliant. I swear his brain just works in ways that other humans don't. And
he finds so many things with that Forge system that just baffles my mind.
Yeah, I don't know. E, do you know? Have you ever heard of Pete the Duck or seen any of his stuff?
I've seen a little. It's one of those things where occasionally someone sends me a link and I look at it. But that's the game types. He's like a master forger in every single way. Like he finds ways to create systems within the forge mode in Halo that you swear nobody ever. It never occurred to anybody that these things might be possible in Halo. I mean, he made a working. What were some of his? He
made tic-tac-toe.
Yeah, he made a working tic-tac-toe game, which is amazing in and of itself.
He made Minesweeper.
Yeah, he made Minesweeper. But he's also made just some other sort of just fun, silly. I mean, I hate to lump them in as casual Halo player game types, but that's sort of, they're not hardcore competitive maps and game types that he does. He finds these really fun, creative mini games, and he builds the entire levels around them using the Forge, and they're incredible. So anytime I hear about new game type options going into Halo 4 that will allow new flexibility within the custom game settings, I instantly think, it's going to be great to play with these settings, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And Pete the Duck is going to figure out a way to do something with them that nobody thought was possible, and he's just going to blow it wide open. And so that's what I'm honestly the most excited for, more than the new maps, more than anything else.
Interesting. But yeah, he does make some really, really cool things. And we actually played some of his maps on last night's Wacky Wednesday, which was a lot of fun. Playing his maps are really, really cool, really fun. Everyone enjoys them. So
yeah, those are a lot of fun at HBO. I had a LAN party at my house a few weeks ago, and invited a bunch of HBOers over, and we did that for a pretty long time. Just played some just fun Forge game types, and a lot of Pete stuff came up.
Nice. Back to the tournament from San Diego Comic-Con. Saturday was kind of a little bit more of the typical tournament style. They did some Capture the Flag, King of the Hill, and Slayer on the 2 new maps. And then the winning teams from both evenings got, like I said earlier, the Nokia phones, and they have access to the championship bundle when it comes out for free. So that's really cool.
Nice.
Let's go on to the next thing here. They got some screenshots of the armor, the new armor that's coming out. So if you guys have not seen these, this is the Prefect armor, the ODST armor, and the Ricochet armor. So the Ricochet armor comes with the Bullseye pack, and it's the one that looks like football gear, which still looks kind of funny on a Spartan. To have the face cage up there is a little bit different than the normal Halo armor goes.
It goes great with Griffball.
It does go very well with Griffball. It looks a lot better than some of those weird ones that we've seen in the game so far.
Well, you're not a fan of the giant unicorn helmet?
The unicorn helmet I'm okay with. It's some of the other ones where it's like there's not even a visor on them.
Oh yeah.
Or that one visor that's a thin strip right up the front. It's like,
you know what that always made me think of? Do you remember in A New Hope when Luke briefly puts down the visor, the blast visor on his helmet, and it's
I'm
like
sorry,
this.
Excuse me, are you talking about Star Wars?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure, because I've never heard of this New Hope thing.
You know, Episode 4, right?
There's only 3 Star Wars movies. I don't know what you're talking about.
There's no arguing with that.
It is titled Episode 4 though, so.
But and it's just like this flat gray painted sheet that's over his face, and he's like, I can't see in these things, and so every time I see some of those helmets in Halo 4, I think of that moment, because I'm like, nobody could ever see through this. Why would anyone go into battle wearing one of these things? It just makes me chuckle.
I guess they've got cameras or something on them, displaying like an inner HUD. I guess I don't know how it works.
There's
all
a
using
GoPro on it. Or GoPro.
I don't know. Some of those, yeah, but those helmets just look ridiculous. Anyways, moving on to there's some screenshots or there's some pictures from the event for the championship bundle when they did that stuff. Some more really cool cosplay. There's some excellent cosplay at RTX. The 405th Source was there. I got some pictures. Some of them are up on our Facebook right now. I'm still processing a few more, and they'll be all finalized by this weekend. So really cool cosplay. There was a cat one there, which is pretty cool.
You mean cat from Reach, not like a kitty?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. No Spartan cat. But yes, actual cat from Halo Reach. Lots of cool things that went on in San Diego Comic-Con. I'm kind of sad I didn't get to go because those pins, oh my gosh, I really want some of those pins.
Yeah, those are great.
The championship update is also coming out. As you guys probably know, they've been having some leaderboard issues throughout the beginning of this week. They finally have nailed down what the issues are, and hopefully it will not be coming up again in the subsequent weeks when they roll over to the next week of play. They are still waiting to announce the finalists from the first week of play, and that should be out by the time the next bulletin comes around. So once those come out, we will be reporting on that. But for the current standings for the second week, we have our top 10 players, and some of these guys I recognize from being up on the top from the first week. Some new people, but the current standings are Chikskis with 65 games played. Of course, all these are 8 scores. Giggle Monstat, which I don't know if that's like Giggle Monster's second account. Giggle Monster is one of the guys that helps run AGL, so I don't know if that's a second account of his or not. Greatest self... Sorry?
Didn't he advance in the qualifier at RTX?
Yeah, he did. But it seems like some of these pros are still playing just to play. So, I don't know. And there's definitely been a lot of talk around the Halo community about pro players going in and making second accounts and playing against people in this playlist. So, unfortunately, it's not something that they can prevent given the rules that they have set up. It kind of sucks, but what can you do? I think 343 may have a way to go through and comb through some of those second accounts and see if people are tied to the same console or something. I don't know if they're going to employ something like that, but it'd be really cool, really awesome if they did. If you're listening to this 343, which I'm pretty sure you are. Let's see. Next on the list in position number 4 is Rommel, 44 games. Number 5, OC Striker with 41 games. Vinius Jar I95 with 38 games. Federal Fool 4282 with 38 games. IX Ivan XI with 37 games. Nirvana with 36 games. And Mr. Brainshot with 34 games. So if you guys are facing any of those in the Global Championship for some reason or another, if you get matched up with them, don't expect to win. Just saying. They're up there in the top 10 for a reason. But that is the second week. Of course, if you guys aren't aware, this week is Rumble SWAT. And there's been the 3 different game types. There's been Rumble SWAT, there's been Rumble SWAT BRs, and then Rumble SWAT rifles. But for next week, we have Rumble Pro settings. In here, it's still 250 score limit, 12-minute rounds, 10 points per kill, 5-second respawn, no death camera, blah, 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 blah. All the typical stuff that you would come to know from the tournament. For the Rumble Pro, you have the typical rifle loadout. You have one of the primary rifles, and you have no secondary weapon, 2 frags, no armor ability, resupply, and explosives. Pretty standard for a lot of the competitive game types that we've seen so far. And then there's a second game type, Rumble BRs. And that is just where it's BR loadouts, so you don't have any of the other weapons in there. But you do have a secondary Magnum to choose. So that's what you can expect for next week in the Global Championship. Finally, on the matchmaking side of things, we have an update to Spartan Ops. This week they're going to go with Covenant-themed missions. We have Episode 1, Mission 1, Land Grab. Episode 1, Mission 2, Sniper Alley. Episode 2, Mission 2, For Science. Episode 2, Mission 3, Hacksaw. And Episode 2, Mission 4, Pelican Down. So if you're still needing to get some of those Spartan Ops achievements, or if you're still looking for credits, or if you haven't played Spartan Ops for some reason, because I actually know some people who haven't finished it yet, go play some Spartan Ops. Lots of fun. At the bottom of the bulletin, of course, we always have the screenshots. And this week's theme is funny. So we have... I think some of these are okay. These kind of screenshots, to me, they're either hit or miss. Do you guys have the bulletin up?
No.
It won't load for me.
We usually pick a favorite. And that usually ends up being the album art for the podcast. I like, for those that are looking at the bulletin right now, possibly Haters Gonna Hate is a pretty interesting one. This is my new monoculars, and then Don't Let Me Fall. I think those are...
I like Am I Holding This Right?
Oh, I didn't even see that one. The sniper's backwards.
Yeah. That's kind of cool. How I snipe most of the time, so...
I'm wondering how they did that.
They probably placed it in Forge and then just walked up to it. I think he's holding a pistol, isn't he? If you look closely.
The front, the left
has to be holding a rifle of some
gripping
kind.
the stock.
Oh yeah.
So, unless it's got to be doctored somehow.
Hacks.
I think. Well, you know, there's those game types where you can have the Spartan models big or small, right? I'm guessing it's something to do with that. Because it looks like he's holding a BR actually in his hand. So I think...
I'm going to say not that one because hacks.
Hacksaws.
Hacksaws. So either... I want to say they probably did a scale on the Spartan. That's probably that's my best guess. Still, that's pretty funny. There's some interesting things that you can do with the Halo system, even if you mod or not. The non-mod ones are the ones that are just like, wow, how did you even come up with that idea in the first place? And the ones that always kind of surprise me the most is what people can do with like the visual effects and explosions and the region fields and all that kind of stuff.
The camera in Halo Theater mode does some really fun stuff when you put it inside explosions. That's great.
Halo 3, I think, was probably the coolest time to get those kind of screenshots.
Mm.
Yeah, I used to do a lot of machinima back then. Halo 3 kind of had like the best theater system, I guess. I really don't know how to describe it. Just it felt a little bit easier to use, and just it looked better.
Yeah, I'm looking for some new theater controls coming with the new Halo on the Xbox One. So I'm hoping we get some really cool things in there, like scripting camera motion, possibly, or
jeez, I think that'd be amazing.
That would be really cool if you could like script an entire sequence and then just hook up your capture card and be like, go. Or use the DVR function on the Xbox One. Do something like that. That'd be really cool. So that is it for this week's Bulletin update. If you guys have not gone and read it, definitely head on over. Pretty short this week. Most of the stuff that they talked about was from San Diego Comic-Con. And of course, they're promoting Spartan Assault, which is out. Definitely go check it out. Has anyone here been able to actually play it so far?
I bought it.
Yes.
What do you guys think?
I'm not all the way through it yet. I want to say I've done maybe a dozen or so missions, and I think it's actually a really sort of just fun. It's a fun top-down twin-stick shooter. I am honestly fighting with the controls a little bit. I think it's going to be way, way better when they patch controller support into it. So I'm kind of waiting for that to happen before I go back to it. I mean, with the touch screen, the touch controls, I was fine with it for good chunks of it, but there are certain areas, like, for example, trying to fight and or hijack a ghost without getting splattered by it, that just seem to require more precision than I can handle with my clumsy thumbs on a touch screen. So I think it's fun though. I think it's well done and I'm enjoying it. So I'm looking forward to that controller support.
Yeah, I just got a Windows 8 laptop and I've been playing it on there. I've only played 5 or 6 missions. It's a lot of fun. I'm definitely very much waiting for controller support. I'm not good with mouse and keyboard. Yeah, I'm not a PC gamer. This is new to me. The art style is really, really, really gorgeous. I like it. It kind of feels like a spiritual successor to Halo Wars in that way, kind of. And it's a really pretty game, and it's got some fun backstory stuff, some good information in between Halo 3 and Halo 4.
What about you, E?
I have not had a chance to play it yet. I'm actually really looking forward to it, but it came out, I think, while I was in Australia.
Yeah.
So once I get a little caught up at work, I'll get to it. But I'll play anything in the Halo universe.
Yeah, I think we can all say that pretty much.
Yeah. The Halo Wars comment reminds me, nobody really cares, but I've been telling anyone around work who will listen for years now that I want Halo Wars 2 with Connect support.
Yeah.
And everyone's crazy.
Oh, that'd be so cool.
But I'm a big RTS player. I used to spend ridiculous amounts of time playing Age of Empires. Right. And I love the concept of like a big arm sweep to multi-select units and then throw them in the direction I want them to go. I think you could do a fantastic motion control RTS game. But apparently I'm the only one who thinks that. So unless I go write it, I don't think it's going to happen.
That sounds really cool, though. Now I want it.
Well, I will go tell people, hey, there's at least one other person who thinks this is a good idea.
I know.
Well, so, I mean, a discussion that we've had on the podcast before is what can you do with like games like Halo, which Halo is mostly a first-person shooter, but you do have that Halo Wars aspect. What can you do with big titles like this that you can integrate well with Kinect? And you just came out with a brilliant idea, and as you were talking about, I'm like, oh my gosh, I think you just unlocked the key to the next Halo Wars.
I really think it would work, but like I said, I've not been able to.
It would take a lot of engineering.
But there are things I've been trying to push for like 12 years now without success. So that may just mean I have bad ideas. It could be something else. I don't know.
I think that's the best way to utilize Kinect for Halo, though, is something in Halo Wars. Because, I mean, while the Kinect integration in Halo CEA was a cool addition to have the whole scanning mode in there, it didn't really add to the functionality of the game. But I think with Halo Wars, you could add so much more functionality through Kinect that it would be so much more beneficial, and people would want to use the Kinect over than just the controller.
I think it would be great to use it for voice commands for your Marine squad mates and things like that. I mean, that's something that's an idea that would work in lots of games, but I'm just a big fan of it in general. Instead of having to take up space on the controller and to be able to tell your AI squad to close up on you or push forward or fall back without stopping what you're doing with regards to aiming at enemies and shooting at enemies, and you don't have to pull yourself away from that side of things. I think that would be a fun use for it.
I think we're going to start seeing a lot of that stuff pretty soon. That was kind of the impression that I got out of Rise, was the
right.
A lot of stuff.
Well, given that on the One, developers will be able to count on you having a Kinect, they will be much more likely to try interesting things with it, and we'll see who comes up with really cool ideas and what sticks.
Rise looks interesting, but I'm still on the edge of whether or not I would buy it day one.
Like playing the demo was definitely eye-opening for it. Like, it didn't necessarily have the best reveal, I don't think. Or I should say second reveal. Especially like if you go on GAF, you hear nothing but negative comments. It's just from people who haven't played it and don't understand. Like, it is not just like a quick timey button smashing thing. Like the quick time is a reward for doing it right, but you can disable all that apparently, according to the guy who I was talking to when I was playing the demo. And it kind of feels like Batman Arkham City, like the combat style. Like it's a talent based combat system. It's not just press A to win. Like, and I've been trying to explain that to people on GAF, but so far it's not going over well.
That's something that's a pretty common thing I've seen. I mean, I listen to a ton of gaming podcasts, and I've heard a lot of people slagging Rise, people who haven't played it, people who just based on what they think the game is, based on the trailer, and then I'm glad you made the Batman comparison, because that's the comparison that I hear all the time from people who actually have had their hands on it, and people saying, no guys, there's a real combat system in this game, and it feels like playing Arkham Asylum or something like that. And then those sort of quote unquote quick timey elements are this sort of just layer on top of it, but it's not. That's not all there is to it. So I'll be really curious to see how the sort of popular conception starts to shift as more and more people start to get their hands on it, because I think that game has a lot of. I thought it looked really interesting. So.
Oh, I think it has a ton of potential. I mean, like, I was kind of blown away by it. That was the one Xbox One game I got to play, and I was talking to a couple of the devs about it when I was playing it, and just like I like, they're kind of history wise, it's not like an accurate necessarily telling of history, but they do take like elements that really happened. They do take like certain people and events, and they kind of they mix up the dates a little bit. But you're going to get at least a bit of a history lesson out of it, and it was fun. Sounds like an interesting story. I like the main character. Plus, not to mention visually, it's stunning. And I thought the gameplay was a blast. I really thought it was fun. Definitely, I think that one will be a system seller if just we can get enough, like if they can start pushing out enough good videos for it, like showing what it really is. I think that one will be a big one thing.
Okay.
That's just me though. I thought it was fun. I can't wait to see like the multiplayer for it. I've heard there's like a gladiator arena, which just sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I can't wait for that.
I have not gotten to play it yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
Interesting. I'll have to check it out more when when the Xbox One launch comes closer to hand. One thing I did forget to mention, speaking of controller support, that is announced to be coming out sometime next month. They didn't give us a specific date, but they will be having it in the month of August at some point. So I'm hoping they come out with it rather soon, because I played through the tutorial on my Windows 8 computer, and the movement's a little clunky. There's no smooth transition from walking in one direction. It's just you're walking one way, you hit one of the other direction keys, and then you're instantly moving that other direction. So it's a little clunky motion, not really that smooth motion that I would expect. So it's still something to get used to.
Something I love about it is grenades detonate on impact. I don't know why. That's just so satisfying to kill somebody with a grenade.
Being able to place a grenade and having it know that you're going to kill somebody instead of randomly bouncing off.
Like, elites don't, like, dodge out of the way, like, you can, like, nail them right in the head. And it's just so satisfying. Honestly, the best thing I can say about that game is just the art is just so pretty. They really, like, they did a good job. It's, Bungie had great artists. They still have great artists. And, like, 343 has really done a good job of carrying that transition. Like, Halo art is just awesome. And the art style in that game is really, really pretty.
That's good. Have you guys found it easy to kind of get the achievements? Or what's your guys' opinions of the achievements in the game?
I've only got a couple. Some of them seemed a little bit time consuming. I don't know. I can pull up the achievement list right now. I've only got like 3 or 4 of them.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've got a few. I've just been I haven't been going out of my way to get them. I've just been sort of letting them come as they happen naturally. And
There's this thing that they've got in here that, like, get gold stars in every mission. I'm not going to get gold stars in every mission. That's the big achievement on there. Like, I'm not good enough in the game to do that. Like, there's some odd stuff on there that, like, I mean, like, that's one of the things I didn't like about Halo Wars achievements, where it's like, get a gold medal and everything. I'm like, I'm not getting that. I'm good at shooters. I'm not good at.
Yeah, I still got some Halo Wars achievements I need to go try to get.
I'm just missing one.
Really?
You know, you have like the rank.
Yeah, I need to hit 50. I'm at 49.
Halo Wars is destroying my achievement. Like, I think I'm like rank 88 or something like that, and like I could be so much higher if it wasn't for Halo Wars. Interestingly enough, the Halo 2 achievements don't count on there. The ones for PC.
Yeah, they don't count to your overall. Was it BPR?
I thought
About proficiency rating.
That was for multiplayer for Reach, wasn't it? Like, there's like a number rank they give you.
Or there's some kind of rank, and the Halo 2 achievements don't count towards it for some reason.
It's because not everybody who played Halo 2 got access to those achievements. So.
Really?
Well, yeah, because lots of people didn't play Halo 2 on a PC.
Oh.
Yeah, but I mean, you can still go out and get the game, and I don't think they've taken down the live functionality yet for that, so you can still go get every single achievement on there. And it's only like $20.
Yeah, what's the story for Halo 2 on live anyway? Because I heard it was supposed to, it was supposed to get shut down in March. Then they was like, we'll push that to June, and then I heard July or something. It's still up and running.
It's still going. Yeah, I don't know. It was supposed to be taken down last month, but they never did. So I guess they found a way to keep it going.
Admittedly, when I got on there were very few people, but I need to get a group together to finish off some of these last achievements.
Yeah, I do too.
Let's do that.
Let's do it. But before we do that, let's go ahead and move on to the main topic of our show, which is Cryptum. Dun dun dun. So this is our first book that we will be covering. We will be covering all 3 books within this trilogy and talking about the Kilo 5 trilogy within the coming months. We're probably going to do 1 a month. So I think with PAX next month, though, we'll probably do the next book one at the beginning of September. So we're doing Cryptum now, and then we will jump into Glasslands for the next book.
You may want to delay the Kilo 5 ones a little bit, because like the Mortal Dictata doesn't come out until January. It's January or February. We got a little bit of time until that comes out.
Yeah, it's January, but by the time that we get there, it'll be very close. Okay. Like we won't be right. Like I've timed it out, and we'll definitely still have plenty of time for people to read. Mortal Dictata. So the schedule works out. I've planned it out. It will work.
Good.
But to start off with Cryptum, for those of you who have not read the books yet, for some reason you're listening to this, I highly suggest you don't listen to this show, go out, get the book, then come back and listen to this after you've read the book. Unless you don't care about spoilers or any of that and you're just here for kind of the short and sweet, then go ahead, go on and listen. But if you do not want anything spoiled, I suggest you turn off this podcast now. You have been forewarned. And with that, let's start talking.
Spoiler.
Let's start talking. All right. So at this point, it's going to be open forum. I'm just going to start off with a few things, and then you guys can run for the hills. So this Forerunner trilogy is talking about the Forerunners tens of thousands of years ago when they were still around. We had a big war with them, and at the premise of this book, humans have been devolved by the Forerunners in a great human covenant war. We've been all pushed back to our home planet Earth, or as the book calls it out, how exactly do you pronounce that?
Erde-Tyrene.
Okay, Erde-Tyrene. Some of the places in here in names are interesting to pronounce.
Audiobooks are
so
your
if
friend.
I butcher them,
Erde-Tyrene for Earth, so I don't know where Tyrene comes from.
So if I butcher them, just correct me, guys. So Erde-Tyrene, also known as Earth. So this is kind of where we start off. We have one of the Forerunners by the name of Bornstellar Makes Eternal Lasting, or just Bornstellar for short, who is of the Builder class. He's a Forerunner Manipular, and the Forerunner society structure is built on these different classes. So you have builders, you have miners, you have warriors, you have librarians, a lot of these different class rankings within the Forerunner social hierarchy. And the builder class is among one of the low-end classes. Didn't used to be, but for the purposes of where the story has started out, they're kind of on the lower end of the totem pole. So Bornstellar at this point has kind of not wanted to pick up the whole family tradition of being a builder. So he's actually been kind of exiled in a way to a minor colony on Erde-Tyrene. And from there on is kind of where the story evolves. It's the story of how Bornstellar becomes this powerful Forerunner by the end of the book. Quite fascinating how the whole thing kind of gets there. Feel free to jump here at any time, guys. You guys are a little bit more into this than I am, so that's kind of why I have you here.
It's a really awesome story. I mean, it's kind of the story about how, Bornstellar essentially becomes the second Didact. It's kind of like how he goes from kind of small, innocent kid to eventually committing pretty much the greatest, cataclysm in the history of the universe. And it's a really good start to the story. Good book.
Honestly, my favorite thing about it is the fact that 343 was able to get an author like Greg Bear.
Oh, yeah.
I am a huge fan of hard sci-fi, always have been. And you don't normally find award-winning authors of that quality who are willing to come write in someone else's universe. And I love some of his stuff. And I mean, there have been some really good authors writing Halo books, but Greg Bear is one of the best science fiction authors there is. And it really raised my level of enjoyment reading these books.
For those of us here, did you guys read Greg Bear novels before reading the Halo books?
I did not.
No.
I've read a ton of them. Okay. The ending of Forge of God, for anyone who's read that, is it's one of the most impactful final paragraphs of any book I've ever read. He's a very, very talented author.
He's really good at that in particular. That last page, really hitting home. He did that in all three of the Forerunner books. It's that last page is rough.
One of the things I loved so much about,
especially this one. Well, yeah, both the ones I've read so far.
Well,
they're great at the end. But the thing I wanted to kind of point out at the beginning was it was hard to get used to the style of his writing. Like, it took me about until halfway through the book until I finally got used to it.
Well, he doesn't. One of my favorite things about his writing is that he doesn't fall into. There's a really easy trap that a lot of science fiction and fantasy writers fall into, which is that they're so concerned about wanting to make sure that the reader understands what's going on that they keep. A lot of writers will continuously stop the story to explain every single little bit of the world that they're portraying. And Bear doesn't do that. You know, if a character mentions something which is just part of Forerunner society, he gives you enough information so that you can sort of put the pieces together yourself, but he never stops the story and stops the plot to just over-analytically explain it outright. There's a lot of figuring out yourself that you have to do as you go through the books, and it does make it difficult to get into because you're like, well, what the heck are these different classes, and what is a manipular? I don't know what that word means, and but as you go, he does explain all these words and terms and structures within Forerunner society, but he explains it all just through context, and so you just learn it sort of naturally through osmosis as you go through the story along with these characters, and it makes it I felt so completely engrossed in this world and in this universe that it became very powerful to me. It really hit me hard. Even before the circumstances of the story got really heavy and dire, I was already just very, very wrapped up in it. And so it's something that he does very well. And it's one of the reasons why, I mean, for me personally, I've read the entire Forerunner trilogy now, and they're the only Halo novels I've read. And I want to read other ones. There's definitely others that I want to get to. But I can say with confidence after reading this trilogy that I would recommend this to anybody who is a fan of great fantasy and sci-fi literature. You don't have to be into Halo to enjoy these books. They're not good Halo books. They're good books, and it's a big achievement that he managed to pull that off.
It's interesting that you say these are the only books that you've read, because at least from my standpoint, I don't know about you, Brian, but I started off with the original trilogy, the Fall of Reach, First Strike, and whatever the other book is, Flood. That's the game one. And the writing style in those, and then subsequent ones like Ghost of Onyx, all the Kilo 5 ones, Contact Harvest, all those have a very similar writing style, even though they're by different artists. And there's definitely differences between the different artists' writing style. But when it came for me to reading the Greg Bear books, it was just totally different. It was hard to get used to. What'd you say, Brian?
So you got to have a dictionary on hand. And then you also have to have like Halo Wiki open as well, because he's like like words. I mean, like it's not like very advanced reading necessarily. It's not like college level reading kind of thing. They're still simple enough books, but like he uses some words in there that they're not like really words. So you definitely have to have like the Halo Wiki up, and sometimes you just have to like look for meaning in the words. Like he'll add a few extra letters. Like I like the name Didact. That's based off a word called didactic. Which means teacher. You got to find like root words kind of to get the meaning of some of these things.
Yeah.
And like the title, for example, Cryptum. That's not a word, but a Cryptum is basically it's a crypt. So
you can guess what it means. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. All derived from some either Latin root of some kind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of that in this book.
Yeah. So, go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of the other things I really loved is the way he wastes absolutely no time. If you are a Halo fan, he wastes no time whatsoever completely blowing your mind with revelations of the Halo backstory. And, within like the first 3 pages, you're like, what humans have fought Forerunners before? What? What do you mean? And the history that he has created to flush out the Halo books. He does what I think is like the one of the best things a sort of a tie-in piece of fiction can do is you can go back and you can replay Halo CE, and you now have a completely different appreciation for what happens in that game, because he's changed your point of reference, and he's given you context to what's going on that is never explored in the games. And he does it in a way that doesn't make the story of the game completely different. Like it doesn't change the base meaning of what's happening, but it just makes everything so much more impactful, and it makes the game that much better, while still staying true to it. And the conflict between Forerunners and humans is obviously, very much at the heart of where the Halo franchise is going, and I think that this trilogy of books it gives that story its legs. It's what gives that story a lot of its potential weight and meaning, and it's something that, for me, one of the sort of problems with Halo 4 is that without reading these books, you don't get a lot of that meaning. But if you have read these books, then the depth and severity of the situation really hits home, and you see the full scale and scope of what they're going for. And it's really cool. It's really cool when you have all the information.
You just touched on my two favorite things about this book. Number one, the revelation about how the Precursors and the Forerunners and humans all fit together in the timeline and their relations to each other. Absolutely, like, my jaw dropped. I put the book down. Whoa.
Yeah.
And that was the single biggest revelation for me in the trilogy. But then also the knowledge of the Didact and who he is and his story. I read this book back when it came out in, I think, 2011, and that made Halo 4 so much more impactful, because when he comes in, I knew who he was. I knew his backstory. It wasn't just he's the big bad. It's this guy.
Yeah.
So,
well, Selenium really helped with that as well. Like fixing a few things afterwards. It was kind of weird with Didact, because like he's the good guy who's the bad guy who's the good guy who's also a really bad guy. Such a complex and cool character, and I really can't wait to see what they do with him, because that's assuming he survives Halo 4, which I'm going to guess he does, and when we're going to see Bornstellar appear in the games, because he's the second Didact. That's going to get crazy too. Really can't wait to see what comes out of that.
There's a lot. You kind of mentioned how it didn't really change the kind of the purpose of the game, Nevin, but to me, it kind of made a pretty big impact, because you have this situation, and it's not just contained in Cryptum. It also goes into Primordium, and I haven't read Silentium yet, so I don't know how much is in there. But to see that humanity is actually familiar with Forerunner tech all the way back in the times that the Forerunners were still around, but then to see how it seems so foreign to us these 100,000 years later, that just kind of blows my mind a bit. It's like, so what happened between this trilogy of humans being still kind of exposed to that and now? What did we devolve further? Did something else happen, or?
Well, I think the assumption is that the Halo rings got fired, and that's the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs, right? That's the big cleansing sweep across the galaxy that almost completely resets everything, right? And obviously, one of the mysteries of the Halo games, but also of these novels and everything is so, these Halo rings have fired, but there are these little traces that have been left behind, and how do they now fit together? How does what's left of humanity fit with what's left of the Forerunners and what's left of the Flood, right? It's put us all in a strange way. It's put these different entities and these different players on a more even footing, because we've all been regressed. We've all been sort of devolved in a way, right? None of these civilizations are at their former glory anymore.
Well, it's kind of an even footing that actually wasn't even supposed to be there either, because, you know, like the librarian's plan goes wrong. And she was trying to build up humanity to be better than all the other races. And, you know, there's something that happens in when Halo fires that kind of messes up her plan. You know, because, you know, she was planning for Halo to fire all along, but there's like this one other event that they had not planned for that happened that when Halo fires, and they're like, oh crap, everything that we've just worked for, we have no way of relaying this information to you know, the descendants of these people. You know, we can't tell the humans 100,000 years from now, you know, what happened. They just kind of have to stumble upon this on themselves, and hopefully they use it for the right reasons. And then it turns out it's the Covenant who actually ends up stumbling upon all that stuff first. And it's definitely it's weird. It's cool though.
Well, and we'll see later in the book though that the Covenant were kind of placed in the same situation, where they got quarantined off and restricted to certain areas as well.
Well, it was just the prophets.
Well, still, but I mean, they're the ones that got. They're the ones that are leading the Forerunner or the Covenant in the games. So, I guess they didn't get pushed back as far as we did, or weren't as threatened, because for them to be so ingrained with Forerunner technology way before they even encountered us seems like there was some kind of effect afterwards.
You got to remember that they almost get wiped out entirely in Cryptum, though. Again, like I think just once Halo fires, I think that is the, you know, as Nevin put it, you know, that's kind of like the asteroid for the dinosaurs. I mean, like that resets everybody and everything, because the Master Builder uses one of the Halo rings on the Prophet homeworld, and I'm assuming by that point, Librarian had already made her indexes for the Prophets, or, you know, maybe they were able to get a handful of them off the planet or something. You know, there's some event that saved a handful of them. But Master Builder kills almost all of them in Cryptum.
Right. We're kind of jumping ahead a little bit, though. Go ahead. Okay, I was just going to pull it back to the beginning here. We have Bornstellar back on Earth. He has an insula, and that kind of translates to an AI for us. It's an artificial intelligence. And while he's on Earth, he is kind of convinced to go searching for some ancient artifacts, some precursor artifacts who supposedly predated the Forerunners.
Looking for something Organon.
Say again?
He's looking for something called the Organon. That is the big. That's kind of like the Holy Grail of Forerunner or precursor artifacts that they're looking for, and he has reason to believe that it's on Earth.
Right. So he's looking around. He runs into two other humans, which become big players throughout the rest of the trilogy. Chakras and Riser.
Big players.
Yeah, big players.
Is that a pun on Riser?
Is that what?
Is that a pun on Riser?
Okay.
It wasn't intended to be.
No.
Kind of.
Just a quick aside. I've talked to a few people about this book, saying, and I've had a few people say that they thought, oh, it's good, but you know, it's a little dry and a little, and my response is like, he introduces a tiny little character named Riser, and he gives him stilts to walk around on, and you don't find that funny? Like, his humor is great, and it's so just subtle, and he just slips it in there in these little ways that, you know, without hamming it up too much, that I really appreciated.
It's a very descriptive name.
Yes.
Yeah, when you think about it, it kind of is. So he's looking for this ancient artifact, and he's run into these two humans which have decided to help him because they've heard of other tales of this big important thing in the middle of this lake. So they set out on a journey. Basically, there was someone that they went and talked to before they went, right? Who kind of was like telling him of the tales of the lake or something. Correct me if I'm wrong. I probably am.
I don't really remember.
That sounds vaguely familiar.
Yeah, I'm in the same spot.
Yeah, I think they went to talk to somebody, and they were preparing for the journey. And then when they get to the lake, there's these creatures, and they're called Merce. and this was kind of a stepping out point for Bornstellar, because at this point he actually had to take off his Forerunner armor and be disconnected from his Ancilla. And Forerunners aren't used to doing that. They're used to having their body armor on, and their Ancillas constantly connected with them and having access to the domain where they can get any information that they needed. But
quick aside there. I'm calling it now. That is one of the most long-term pieces of foreshadowing in the entire book, because I'm willing to bet money that at some point, maybe in Halo 5, maybe in Halo 6, well, I mean, Chief's already been separated from his Ancilla, and they're very much drawing connections early in Cryptum about, like, you can't help but notice the similarities between this young Forerunner and what we know of Chief and the other Spartans, right? This idea that he is so completely not dependent, but he is part of his armor and his Ancilla, and they are part of him, and the idea of having one without the other is an alien concept to them in a lot of ways, and that's exactly how we think of Chief as well. And so, it is this big important moment for Bornstellar, being separated from those things for the first time, and I think it's a safe bet that we've already started to see hints of that in Halo 4, and I think they're going to take that further as well. If 343 is intent on exploring Chief's humanity and who he is as a character as much as they have sort of said they are, then I think we're going to see further similarities there and further sort of mirrors of those situations.
So I'm going to take a little bit of a drastic jump here, but we haven't quite gotten to this, but there's the librarian. We guys know her from Halo 4, but do you think the librarian has put Chief on a similar path that she did with Bornstellar then? Oh no, I wouldn't say necessarily the same path as like becoming the next Didact, but similar as in maybe going through the different mutations possibly for humanity. Like maybe she has something planned out for humanity to kind of rise up to where the Forerunners possibly were.
I think that's a safe bet, personally.
Yeah, I mean, she clearly had something planned out for him. She kind of gives him his own mutation in a way in Halo 4 to make him immune to the Composer. So, yeah, I mean, safe bet, sure. It's starting to feel a little bit like a Chosen One kind of story.
Yep.
Almost.
Yeah.
Which I'm not 100% in on that, but I mean, like, I guess you can kind of make the argument that Chief isn't necessarily the Chosen One. He's just kind of like, like he was like one of like a Chosen 30, and it's like, oh, he just happened to be the one out of the bunch that was a little bit better than everybody. So.
It's sort of a last man standing kind of situation, right?
Yeah, that's a really good way to
put it. It's less Chosen One and more self-selecting. By surviving, you have made yourself eligible for this.
Yeah.
I think it was a really elegant tie-in, because like one of the points that Nyland made back in Fall of Reach was that, all these candidates for the Spartan program, they all have really great genes. There's a very specific genetic pool that they have to pull from. And then, now, 12 years later, that's essentially the plot for that Librarian was going on, saying that, well, I've manipulated your genes in order to create, this, and this, and this, and this. And I guess from the very beginning, she kind of knew how the gene pools would eventually play out so that we would get a handful of perfect humans who can then eventually do this, and this. So
it's just amazing that those thousands and thousands of years of planning actually come to fruition without too many hiccups. Until, of course, we run into Halo 4 and she says, well, it didn't exactly turn out the way I thought it was going to turn out.
Well, there's one big hiccup, and that's the Covenant. I mean, who knows how many people of that, that perfect genetic pool that Master Chief is kind of from? Who knows how many people the Covenant wiped out as a result of that? I mean, I think we nailed it with, I don't think Chief is the Chosen One, but one, he's a select genetic pool that was kind of created to be perfection, right? And, that was the big hiccup with the Librarian's plan was, oh man, the humans were supposed to be, and I guess at the end of Halo 3, they do end up to be the most powerful race in the galaxy, but severely weakened from their previous states. And I think the Covenant was definitely the major hiccup in Librarian's plan. She did not anticipate that.
Right. There are lots of little things in here, but there's some things within the book that kind of go into how much influence the Librarian actually has on a lot of different things within her current timeline and with planning down the road for humanity. Going back to Bornstellar in the lake, they get across. He's still trying to get used to having sun on his bare skin and all that stuff, sand in his feet. They get to this place in the middle of the lake, and
sorry, I've got this mental picture of Bornstellar singing the Beach Boys now, and it's
oh boy.
Sorry, carry on.
So they get to a place called Jack Munkin's O. How do you say that? Big Man's Water.
Yes.
And that's where they have a bunch of different antiques and kind of artifacts laying around. And this eventually becomes the location where things start to be put in motion, so to speak. If they already have been kind of with Bornstellar being sent to Earth, meeting up with Chakras and Riser, and them actually being sent out on this mission, essentially, by Bornstellars and Scylla. But by the time they get there, there's already so many things going in place where Bornstellar starts to feel urges to do things. And he starts to see behaviors from Chakras and Riser that he can't quite explain. It seems like they're kind of pre-programmed or something. And after a little while, they find this crypt, and Chakras and Riser, I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit here. Go back, guys, if you want to. But they start to do chants and everything, and the ground starts to shake. And Bornstellar is kind of there's something in the middle of this chamber that they've stumbled into, and there's pillars all around. There's war sphinxes around the edge of this kind of chamber, and after a while, he has this urge to go up and touch this big object in the middle, and at that point, he releases what we now know is the Didact from a millennia of what they specifically call it?
Bad sleep.
Meditation.
I didn't think it was. I thought they called it something else other than meditation.
They used in Halo 4. I don't quite remember.
Yeah, there is a name for it, but
yeah, but yeah, basically a millennia of hibernation and meditation on the sentence that he was committed to for things that he did. So at this point, he's like, "Why did you wake me? I'm still supposed to be asleep." And at this point, Bornstellar's like,
dude, I don't know.
I didn't do anything."
His first response is kind of panic because he's freaking out. He's like, "Have the halos been fired?" That was his first question when coming up and waking up.
Right.
I love that moment.
Yeah, I guess there's definitely a really interesting difference between the game and the book, though, with Didact. Like how when Didact wakes up from the Cryptum, it takes him like 10 days to fully recover. Like he has to drink all these different nutrients and fluids and stuff like that. In the game, he's out, he's ready to go. It was interesting.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it was a way longer hibernation too. It was almost 100 times longer in Halo 4 when Chief wakes him than it was when Bornstellar woke him up. So I thought that was really interesting, like how it just he's out, he's got his armor on, he's ready to go, but the book takes him a little week to recover.
Cryptum technology really leaped forward in those few years between
those few years.
Yeah, and that okay, got it. But it's I guess one of the things that I always found the most confusing with the book, and I kind of always had to I kept a little mini timeline for me as soon as events started to make sense. Right, as soon as the events started to fall into place. So Didact was in the Cryptum for 1,000 years. When he's woken up, this is about 10,000 years after the human Forerunner War, and after the Flood arrived for the first time. And then 1,000 years earlier, they were discussing hey, what are we going to do if the Flood arrive again? And that's kind of how the conversation came up to either Halos or Shield Worlds, and then Didact forced himself into a Cryptum. Well, during that time, over the course of the past 300 years, apparently the Flood have come back. And it's a big secret. Nobody, I don't know how they managed to keep it that much of a secret from, the populace, but apparently, it hasn't reached that tipping point yet. And
Right.
He awakes just before the shit hits the fan.
Yeah. There's lots of other things that goes on during the time that he's out, too. But, like you said, one of the first things that he asked was, have the Reens been fired? And, of course, Bornstellar has no idea. As far as he knows, he did know, but...
Well, yeah, I love how he asked him that question, and just his immediate response is I have no idea what you're talking about. What have I gotten myself into?
Yeah.
Have the Fuzars been whiz-banged yet?
Yeah, it's a very cool. I've already mentioned about how I love the constant sort of juxtaposition that Greg Bear does of putting Bornstellar in these situations or describing him in these ways that sort of hint back towards your experiences with the Halo games and what we know of the, what I'd call the current Halo story, current being, Chief during the time of the Human Covenant War. And this whole early section of the book, reading as Bornstellar, and you're reading about his ancilla and his armor, and he's in these mysterious places that he doesn't know much about, and he's trying to understand these ancient artifacts that he's finding, and he accidentally digs something up that that's way, way over his head and beyond him, and it gets him pulled into a whole larger story. If you switch some names and places around, it is the story of Halo 1 in a lot of ways, right? And it's just something that Bear did so well, of, like I said, about how, making it feel true to what we think Halo is, of seeing sort of the different side of the coin of somebody who in some ways is so much like Master Chief, just in terms of his circumstance and situation and what's going on, and then being introduced to this larger, greater story in a similar way. It's great. It's really great, well thought out backdrop to the eventual positioning of putting him as the Chief's nemesis, right? Of these two have gone through some very similar experiences. They do have a lot in common in a lot of ways, right? And it's one of the things that I love about the whole trilogy, the whole Forerunner trilogy. But it's sort of, I think they focus on it the most in Cryptum out of the three. You get the strongest sense of that similarity between the two on a certain level.
Well, you get the most face time with Didact in that book as well, so definitely. I can see that.
I want to step back just briefly, but when Bornstellar was about to open the crypt, I actually have the book open right now, so I'm kind of thumbing through the pages, but I came to the part where he actually is hearing these voices in the head, and when he is about to open the crypt, there's these voices like, do you witness and do you defend the position or the stance of bringing back the Didact? There's this whole mechanism of this big decision of whether or not the Didact should be brought back in certain times, and he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about, and he keeps on, or this voice keeps on saying, for this person, do you speak for him? Do you defend the decision to bring him back?
Yeah.
From this is the part from Ageless Peace. So that's kind of a big implication that putting the Didact there was a big step for the Forerunners, because it was chaos before then. And if you do this, the peace that you now know throughout the galaxy is not going to be there anymore. So it's like there's this big decision right in front of Bornstellar, yet he has no idea what he's doing, and yet he still follows through with it.
He's curious.
He manages to BS his way through it.
Just play it cool. Play it cool.
Actually, some we glassed over entirely. War Sphinxes. Man, those things sound awesome. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Levi's War Sphinx drawing.
Oh yeah.
To call it a drawing, that is not doing it justice. That amazing piece of art that should probably be on the Sistine Chapel. That God, why weren't those in Halo 4? Those things looked, or at least Levi's idea of what they look like. They sound amazing. I want to fight one. That's all I want to do right now is I want to fight one of those things. And maybe that's what that thing was in the Halo 5 trailer. Maybe, I don't know. Or the Halo Xbox One trailer, excuse me, I shouldn't call it Halo 5. But whatever that was, that thing is kind of similar to what I had in my mind for what a War Sphinx was. And
yeah.
The Didact has a bunch of those guarding his Cryptum.
So we actually had a podcast where Sal came on, and based on some audio excerpt from something, I can't remember what it was exactly, but he said there was proof in some official release of some audio that there's a lot of evidence to support that that's actually mendicant bias.
Oh yeah, that's what I was talking about. I guess before you started recording, that link that's on HBO. Somebody put up the text transcript. I've not listened to it because what it is it's a the final chapter after Silentium, and it's 45 minutes long, and you have to listen to it through Waypoint, and just it's kind of awkward to get through, and I just haven't gotten around to it yet. But somebody put up a fantastic text version of that, and it the evidence kind of points to whatever that thing was being mendicant bias, but that's 343's also kind of come out and said that, well, what you're seeing in that video may not be indicative of story or gameplay. So I don't know really what to believe at this point, but it definitely compelling arguments for sure.
Now I need to go listen to this because I have not. So
hang on, I can link you the thing on HBO. Somebody, it's short. Give me just a moment here. I'll put it up.
Yeah. So while you're doing that, though, back to the book. So we have the Didact out of his Cryptum now, and he is asked kind of questioning everybody there, questioning Bornstellar, why that he woke him up, why there are humans there in the first place. I guess he was put in the Cryptum before he was transported to Earth, and Chakras and Riser are kind of looking over at Bornstellar, like, what is he doing? What the heck is he? And you have the Didact on the other hand is like, who are these humans? Why are they here with you? Kind of thing. So a lot of this interesting tension between both sides of things.
There's a bit of downtime for them, but as soon as Didact recovers, they are pretty much on their way. I guess he kidnaps them all.
Right.
Which was
pretty much.
Well, so the thing is, very shortly after the Didact is resurrected from the Cryptum, you have a bunch of different ships starting to come to Earth, and there's actually some mechanisms in place where the island that he's at is actually not visible from space, and so all their scanners and everything can't really detect that he's there, but they know he's there somehow.
Yeah.
And they're there to look to him for... Huh?
Yeah. They're there to hey, come help us. We're boned.
Right.
As it turns out that flood, they're pretty powerful. We need help is pretty much what's going on.
Right. But you said it was 10 days while he recovered?
Oh, that's just the number I remember off the top of my head. I could be pulling that out of my ass.
Yeah, something like that.
It seems.
It took a while because when he was first resurrected, all the pieces of his armor came down, and it was hooked up to fluids that I guess had nutrients in them to kind of help bring him back, and he had to actually recover for a little while.
Well, the mental image that I got when he was being woken up is that he was kind of like a mummy. How they're shriveled, and that's kind of what I got out of it.
Have you guys seen Underworld?
I haven't.
Oh, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the picture I had. Just this sort of shriveled up kind of mummy man sort of thing. Sort of how I pictured it.
But as soon as Didact's ready to go, though, they take off. Didact has some questions that he wants answered, and don't they head straight for Charum Hakor?
Right.
Yes.
The last big human battle, and he wants to see. I think he's specifically looking to see is the Precursor still in its tomb.
Well, way to spoil it. I was going to build up to it, but
well, okay, never mind then.
No, keep going. It's fine.
We'll just pretend he didn't say that.
Yeah.
Nothing in a spoiler cast? Well, my goodness.
Well, I was going to go progressive, but I guess since we just jumped there anyways, no, it's all right.
Yeah,
it's all right.
I was getting like the big details.
Right. But yeah, so there was a ship hidden underneath the Cryptum, and they basically took that and hit slip space, I think before they were pretty much detected. So the other ships that were there had no idea where he actually went off to. But yeah, they went straight to Tirumhakor, where the supposed last Precursor was located. But at this point, Bornstellar doesn't know. The humans don't know what's going on. Only the Didact knows really why they're going there in the first place. And I believe they had some discussions while they were going there. Like, at first, the Didact didn't even care about Bornstellar because he was of the builder class. He was of a lower class and was thought of a simpler mind by the Didact, who was warrior class, which is one of the higher level classes. I think just short of the life workers being the top class.
Well, that's a little bit. It's a little more complicated than that because during the warrior classes were the upper class, and things have shifted, and that's part of the real the context around a lot of Cryptum is that the Didact is sort of the head guy of this class that's not really respected anymore. And so even though he's this big boss man, there are lots of people like the Master Builder who we meet who pretty much treat him like they can just boss him around and get him to do whatever they want. He has gone through his own sort of, both he and his entire group, his entire collective within the Forerunners, they've been debased in a similar way to what the Forerunners then did to humans and so on and so forth, right? So when he comes out of his Cryptum, the builders are running the show. They're the ones in charge now, and that's why the Halo program in general has gone forward so much.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely part of the greater conflict between Didact and Master Builder. Is the warriors are kind of outcast now, and their ranks have been, all their titles, they've been pretty much stripped from them. But yeah, you nailed it though with what's why.
There's some really interesting parallels in the classes, and then if you look at how the Covenant are formed,
yeah,
and how the different species are segregated, it's kind of interesting.
And
yeah.
No, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. I was just gonna say, yeah, there's definite similarities there. Yeah.
There's, and you really don't see that with the human side of things. You see the different kinds of humans when we're on Earth, because what was it? Chakras or Riser was a Florian, and Chakras was something else.
Yeah, basically, Riser is a hobbit.
Yeah.
Right,
pretty much,
like basically, right. That's sort of, he's sort of he's from a different.
I'm glad I wasn't the only person thinking that. Yeah.
What?
So I'm glad I wasn't the only person thinking Hobbit. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, you see, there's definitely different kinds of humans, but they don't seem to have the same sort of. They don't really get into a hierarchy the way
intentionally.
They don't specialize to the same degree.
Yeah.
Well, the Forerunners split them up into a half dozen different races so that they couldn't recombine. Because they kind of figured, humans are, naturally decisive. At base core, they figured, hey, there will be some decisiveness between the different groups. There'll be, equivalents to racism or whatever in between those groups. And they're not going to come back and fight us if they're splintered and divided already, right? So, let's devolve them and split them up into different species so that they can't reform.
Right.
And then that definitely affects, different genetic paths that they would go along as well, because, when Librarian took all those samples of all the surviving human races, they're clearly a different physical form as well than they were when they were fighting the Forerunners at their prime. Because, I guess you would kind of figure that the Forerunners and the humans, like the humans that were fighting them, would have been like physically taller, so that they could fight Forerunners in a more even playing field. They may have been smarter because they've got like this great technology, etc. So that was one of their the Forerunners' big plans was if we split them up, then say even if they do try to recombine and if the different species mate with one another, like it's just they can't form up to what they once were.
Right.
There's a really good science fiction novel from many decades ago that I am suddenly blanking on the name of, that actually has kind of a similar theme that hit me when I was reading Cryptum. And it's it's by a famous author, but I can't remember who it is at the moment. But essentially what happens is humans unknowingly discover across a belt of like basically blankness in the galaxy. It's like everything's been blown up. You can't get from A to B until technology gets to a certain level. They get to that level, they're able to go explore the other side, and they find a completely different race that is nothing like humanity. But then it turns out eventually that once upon a time humanity and that other race were the same, and they were separated so they could grow apart, and then they breed back together. And I had a huge deja vu moment back to that story when I read Cryptum. And now this is going to drive me nuts until I think of it. I'm going to think of it as soon as we hang up.
We'll go back in. We'll edit it in post. When I say we, I mean Dustin, of course.
Throw it in the chat, please. Otherwise, I'm just going to sit here and rack my brain until I come up with it. It's somebody famous. It's an Asimov or someone almost of that scale. It'll come.
All right. Well, while it comes to you, we'll get back to the book. So as we go travel to Cherim-Hakor, isn't this journey, or was it the one right after where they start to talk about putting Bornstellar through his first mutation?
I don't quite remember the specific time that they decide it has to happen.
I thought it was on the next trip. I thought, but I could be totally wrong about that.
It might have been on the next trip after Didact talks to his old friend, kind of like that old war buddy of his,
right?
That's running the Prophet Homeworld. And I think he kind of like finally gets the gravity of the situation. And the reason why he implanted Bornstellar to begin with was it was kind of like a last ditch measure, like, okay, I think I'm going to die. I've got to leave a fallback plan. I really don't think he anticipated he would survive, that there would be two Didacts in any sense. So you're probably right. It's probably like the second trip, I would guess.
Yeah.
It's been a little bit too long since I've read the book. It's been a few months. So some of the finer details.
Yeah, same for me. Some of the finer details is not coming to me. I do remember, though, during that first trip, there was a lot of the times where Bornstellar was hooking up with the Ancilla on the ship, and he started to really get interested in some of the story of who the Didact was, what was going on, and just really curious about some of the things that were going on currently within the Forerunner realm. So lots of basically learning for him as they're waiting on the ship going to Cherim-Hakor, and then seeing Chakras and Riser start to see some of the stuff that's been buried within them from the librarian start to come out as well, and having some of these memories come back, having them struggle with some of the armor that they have been equipped with and all that stuff. So lots of different talks between the Didact and Bornstellar as well. The Didact basically warms up to him, even though at first he really didn't think much of Bornstellar. But as they went on, and as Bornstellar kind of expressed interest in who he was and what he was doing, the Didact starts basically kind of takes him in as a under his wing and starts to teach him a few things. So
he sees his potential.
Right. I'm failing right now at being a good host on knowing all this stuff.
No, it's fine. I mean, you don't worry if we miss plot details and things like that, because I mean, it's theoretically most people listening to this have sort of read it anyway, right? But I think that if we're at the point where there's the two like real major things that happen in this book that I think are sort of the greatest importance throughout the greatest importance within this book, and as to how it relates to the rest of this trilogy. They both happen right near the middle, sort of back to back here, where the first of all, there is the time spent on Sharum Hakor, where some of it happens sort of in the middle of the book, and then they kind of flash back to it again later and reveal more about what happened. But this whole interaction with the Precursor and this is where you start to first gleam into what E was mentioning earlier about the sort of the relationships between not only the humans and Forerunners have this history, but then the way the Precursors are sort of tied to both of them in a potentially interesting way, and a potentially very meaningful way. This all starts to happen sort of right in the middle here, and then either directly before or directly after, depending on which is correct. We can't quite remember. But then there's Bornstellar taking his first mutation, right? And I remember when I was reading Cryptum and I got to this section of the book, that was my first like really, really clear hint of where I think where they're going with Chief in Halo 4 and Halo 5 and these themes of evolution and the advancement of the species and moving forward. I saw Bornstellar starting to grow into something more than he already was, and yeah, I gotta say, just on an aside note, the way that Greg Bear communicates this transformation is like it's a thing of beauty. Like the way these little thoughts start popping into Bornstellar's head, they just become part of his inner monologue. And every now and then he sort of takes a step back and says that, hey, that wasn't me who said that. What's going on here? And the way the Didact's voice and his voice develop into these two separate entities within his brain, and then begin to merge, and he becomes less aware of the differences between the two, and to the point where by the end of the book they are one. I thought that was one of the most. It's such an absolute treat to read. It was so amazing, and it's one of my favorite elements about the book in general. And this mid section of the book here really stands out to me because this is where it starts. This is where, in my opinion, it starts to get really, really good.
Well, right after the visiting Sharum Hakor and seeing that the Precursor was gone is where things really start to get interesting, because I guess we kind of made a decision that the talk of the mutation started in the second trip, and I guess it makes sense because I believe they were talking about how he was still going through some of the pains as they arrived at their next place.
Yeah.
So I actually have the place up in the book where they're at Sharum Hakor, and they're talking about how, or the Didact's talking to Bornstellar about how that was the reason behind the war with the humans. And it wasn't necessarily directly at first. They didn't know that it was, but he tells Bornstellar that the thing that we locked away in here, in this time lock, was a terrible evil. And the fact that it's not there anymore has him very, very concerned. He goes into a little history behind the human war with the Forerunners, and that the humans in the Shayum were actually in alliance at one point. But the Forerunners quickly put that down. They actually gave pardon to the Sanshinium and just quarantined them, and then they didn't really have much sympathy on the humans, and they devolved them and put them back to Earth and basically wiped them out from the rest of the galaxy.
Yeah, I think that's that was a thing where the prophets didn't they kind of like trade sides back? Didn't they flip flop? Refresh my memory on that. Somebody they knew the humans were about to lose, and didn't they go back to the Forerunners and say, "Yeah, hey, we're sorry," and that's why necessarily devolved, but they were stuck in their own galaxy. You can't go or their own solar system. You can't go anywhere further.
Yeah,
and
they weren't.
That's where you get a big shock, or at least I did reading it. It's like, wait, what happened to humanity? Because you both find out that humanity was at one point much more impressive, I guess, than it is today, and you realize what was taken away.
Right.
And apparently the prophets, they lose something, because apparently they were a much more attractive race physically. Apparently they weren't those goofy looking snake things that they are.
Well, my impression was that was an age thing. Was that the only prophets we've seen in the Halo games were really, really old. That was what I got out of it. I could be wrong.
That's the same thing I got too.
I could be wrong in that. And the thing that I got out of it was that as part of their punishment, they were also like physically changed to be significantly like uglier than they were, because like they apparently had some kind of like universal attraction to. Yeah,
they were described as being very sexual and very visually pleasing, and yeah.
Like the only thing I can think of is like, like Mass Effect, how you have like the blue girls and the Asari in Mass Effect. They're kind of like, they're neutral to everybody. Like everybody kind of likes them. They're not some crazy goofy appendage. But there's something there for everybody, and that's what I got out of them originally. Out of what they described the prophets as, and then like as punishment, their physical features were kind of devolved. But if you guys got something about age out of there that I missed, then okay, fair enough.
And going back to how I was saying before about how Greg Bear's writing makes you look at the Halo games in a totally different way. I mean, this is basically where you find out that while the humans were fighting the Forerunners, like the humans were fighting alongside the prophets in a very similar relationship to the way the prophets used the elites in their war against humanity, right? And that the prophets acted as leaders and sort of the strategists and the people kind of steering the ship, but that it was the elites on the front line doing most of the fighting. And sure enough, hundreds of thousands of years earlier, that was us in the elite's shoes. We were filling the exact same role, that's sort of just what it says about the prophets as a society, and they're kind of users in a way. They like to let others do the take the risks for them, and then sure enough, when things don't go their way, they fall back and manage to get away with a far less severe punishment from the Forerunners than we had to face.
Right. Let's see. Moving on to I have everyone saying in here the next place they went was Farum Hakor. Does that sound right? Or Fawn Hakor?
Yeah, I think so.
Was that the that wasn't the Shin Shayum homeworld, was it?
I think it is.
Okay.
It was the planet that
it is.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, it was the planet they test fired the Halo ring.
Oh, that's right. All right. So they go over there, and I believe during this time is when they actually start talking about Bornstellar going through his first mutations, and that whole painful process for Bornstellar. They go into some details behind that. They go talk about some more of the history behind the war with the Forerunners and the humans and all that stuff during this whole journey. So there's a part in here where the ship of the Ancilla is trying to connect Bornstellar back with the Ancilla he had while he was on back on Earth to kind of help make the transition for Bornstellar a little bit easier. Getting used to the new information that is coming down to him, and the Didact is actually slowly giving him more and more access to his Ancilla. So he's kind of opening up to Bornstellar more and more as the trip goes on. Do you guys know how long this, like the duration of how long this trip actually takes over? Is it like a few weeks
I
or?
I remember how long it takes. No.
I don't remember. No, it's not particularly long though.
You didn't think it was, but for the Didact to basically go from not respecting Bornstellar to being like, okay, I'll be the giver of the first mutation or something or whatever it's called, is quite a leap in such a short amount of time.
I think it was just Didact seeing just how bad the situation was, and that he was pretty certain that his time was kind of near.
Yeah, it was
so like preserving his imprint.
Yeah, because at this point they see the damage that the Master Builder has done, and that's kind of like that's a really dangerous thing to have information on. A high-ranking government official. I mean, like your life is in danger at that point. And I think Didact really realizes that. He goes, "Shit, we've just found Von Hakor. Clearly, Halo has been fired at some point." Because I mean, look at what's happened to this planet. It's been completely destroyed. Master Builder is clearly involved here. And now that everybody knows that I'm free, they're going to be coming for me. I've got to imprint my memories into somebody so someone can carry on my work. Oh, here's Bornstellar. He's my only option. So, I think it was just a circumstance.
I agree.
Okay. So, after going to Farum Hakor, they actually get nailed down by the Master Builder, who is another Forerunner, who's basically, isn't he in charge of what's kind of going on now?
He is pretty much, I don't want to say the president, that's not the right word, but yeah, he is the main political leader. He is kind of he's definitely the most influential one.
He's the head of the council. And yeah.
Right, so they actually corner him on Von Hakor, and they shoot his ship down, right?
Yeah, they stop him because, they take Didact hostage because that's when Didact thinks he's going to die. And I guess I'm jumping a little bit here just to save time, but I guess at the very end of the book, you're told that Didact was executed by Master Builder, and we eventually learn that he's not. But that was like he was capturing him to I would assume his eventual goal was to interrogate him and then kill him, but something happens and that doesn't actually work out. But it was during that time though where Didact is trying to find out information on the Precursor. I think that was like his main goal, was to get there and find out what has happened. Where is it? Yeah, because that was a really big important plot point for him, because at that point he was one of the only Forerunners who'd actually met it and spoken with it. And he was he's pretty scared because he knows there's like this truth about the flood that he knew, or at least he kind of had the barest glimpses of, that nobody else knew, and it was his primary goal in finding out what was going on with the Precursor.
Right. Going through the hell accident of the ship, though, Bornstellar sees everyone basically be taken away at that point. They're all captured essentially. They have they get in these pods and get ejected from the ship, and I think they pretty much crash land on Von Hakor. I think, wasn't there the Chakras and Riser, weren't they like knocked out or something?
Yeah, I mean, there's a jump in storytelling, specifically in this chapter, because they all get kidnapped. Didact is whisked away. And we think Didact dies. We don't see Didact until much later, until the third book. Bornstellar is returned to his family, which then, starts to trigger, the main, the climax of the book. And then, Riser and Chakas, they're kind of sealed away in some kind of bubble, and they don't wake up until the beginning of Primordial. Right. So they are no longer in the book at this point. So, and now at this point in the book, we've discovered a little bit more information. We've discovered that, the Precursor, this amazing, for anybody who's listening who hasn't read it, I mean, I don't know why you're listening to this, but, this is the last alien god, essentially. This is the race of aliens before the Forerunners. They're the ones that created Forerunners, that created humanity, and apparently this is the last one. And there is some confusion. There's some kind of
I guess this detail comes up later about whether or not, they are, are the precursors flood, or did they create the flood? There's some kind of, there's that question is always being asked throughout the books. And it's kind of at this point, though, where they do discover that the precursor is gone. Didact had spoken to it thousands of years earlier, and it was his decision to keep it imprisoned where it was. But the test firing of Halo released it, because apparently it was encased in this old prison cell that was built by precursors. And there's kind of like this plot device that's used to where Halos don't affect any physical architecture. They just kill, people and things, like organic matter. But apparently it also works on precursor technology and items and buildings. And that allowed the last precursor to escape.
It's a very bizarre kind of neutron bomb.
It's kind of like, it's a weird story. Like, that wasn't necessarily explained, or if it was, it's a subtler detail that I missed as to why it works on precursor technology and not just buildings and such in general.
The bit about the technology I never really internalized that, why it worked that way. It was just, it kills everything that's alive, and I just kind of moved on from there.
There's something regarding that in book 3 that might explain it. I mean, I guess we can get into it in the Selenium podcast, so ignore that. But there might be a plausible explanation in Selenium, though it's really subtle, and like it's not something that's strikingly obvious.
Yeah, I've read Silentium, and I don't remember it, honestly.
Well, I mean, you know how the domain is destroyed?
Yeah. Yes.
The domain was an organic being. It wasn't. Yeah, like the best thing that I always simplified the domain as, it was like the Forerunner internet. If I'm overly simplifying it to like 1,000 degrees here,
Right.
But it wasn't just code. It was it was somehow organic, and and that's how it killed it, how it destroyed the domain. And I guess maybe it's possible that the precursor technology is also organic in a way. That maybe that's an explanation. I don't know. I mean, there's just something I'm spitballing here.
Now I'm going to have to go look that up when I get home. Speaking of which, unfortunately, we are 2 hours in already.
Yeah. So
my dog is waiting for me at home. I'm still at work, so I'm going to have to cut out, guys.
That's perfectly fine. We're going to try to wrap up quickly, but thank you for being on, E. Really appreciate it. We'll try to get you on some other time where it's not necessarily as much of a time restriction.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Hey, it was nice meeting you.
Thanks for coming.
It was great talking to you, E. Yep.
But while Bornstellar is back home, because that's where he got shipped back to, was back home with his parents. He's kind of going through some of the stuff that he has access with his Ancilla, going through some more of the things that his family's actually involved with. So it turns out that there's been some kind of dealings between his father and the Master Builder. And Bornstellar finds out about this and discovers that one of the Halo rings was actually used to wipe out, or was fired against the Shanshayum, which kind of started to bring back some memories of the Didact within Bornstellar. That combined with a few other things that happened while he was back at home, we really start to see this progression of Bornstellar becoming the next Didact, or becoming the Bornstellar Didact as we know him now.
Mm-hmm.
I really didn't get any sense of that transformation too much until Primordium. Like you can see kind of like the edges of it. He's getting more information, but like definitely on like a physical level, he's not. He's still Bornstellar at this point, and I think he's still Bornstellar at the end of the book even. It isn't until Primordium that he is Didact for sure. But go ahead.
I was just I saw the very end of Cryptum as the real turning point, because, and again, I mean, I'm sort of jumping around a bit, but this is where the very end of the book is where he meets the librarian.
You should introduce them as Didact. Yeah.
And not only that, but he internally, he doesn't see her and say, "Oh, there's the Didact's wife." He sees her and says, "There's my wife." Like at that point, he is the Didact, right? And there is no. If he stops to think about it, he can be consciously aware of the separation, but I think his instinctive reaction in the moment is that no, that's my wife. I am the Didact.
So I guess like just for the interest of time, I guess I'd like try to sum up like the last big events. So like the climax of the book is like this was the part that blew my mind. We always knew the story of Mannequin Bias from the Halo 3 terminals, or at least, we kind of had like an idea of, what he was up to. But this is where you really see his betrayal is, like there's this Forerunner council that's convening to see whether or not the master builder is guilty of, treason. They're at the Forerunner capital. And then in the middle of this court session, I guess, what's his name? Mendicant Bias shows up with Halo rings. He just shows up out of nowhere. And there's this huge process where everybody's trying to get out right before, like nobody knew that Mendicant Bias had turned at that point because, he'd been missing for 60 years. No one knew where he was. No one knew where his Halo ring was. Mendicant Bias was apparently in control of a Halo ring at that point.
Yeah.
It had gone missing. No, just nobody knew. And, like it was only 60 years, like for Forerunner, 60 years ain't that much, So, I mean, it wasn't like, it wasn't something to be completely alarmed about. But it was something of interest, like, hey, Mendicant has been gone for 60 years. What's he been up to? Well, apparently he's been chatting with the Precursor, essentially with Gravemind, for the past 60 years. And essentially the Precursor has been very slowly turning him against the Forerunners, and to the tipping point to where he decides essentially the Flood is the next evolution of the galaxy. And he sides with Gravemind, and he launches a full-out assault on the Forerunner capital. And he destroys, he kills almost every Forerunner. Like the Forerunners, that's almost an extinction event right there. There's very few of them. He definitely destroys the entire Forerunner government for sure. And that was a big, big deal. That was huge. And, Bornstellar and whoever, I don't remember her name. He was with a female bodyguard.
Right.
Yeah, I don't remember her name. She wasn't a big character. They barely get away before Halo detonates.
I think, well, look, according to the wiki, maybe Splendid?
Yes.
Dust of Ancient Suns?
I don't remember. Yeah, again, she wasn't a big character, so it wasn't a big, I don't think they ever brought her up again as far as I'm aware.
No, they didn't.
But, which it was interesting because it felt like they were building her up to be a main character, but they kind of didn't. But, yeah, that was a really, really big event. That is the first, that's the first time anybody had seen Mendicant in 60 years, and he shows up with a Halo ring and says, hey, I'm sick of you guys, and he destroys the Forerunner capital. Which, if anybody listening, like you can go onto HBO and you can kind of dig through the archives on halo.bungie.org. There are some really, really, really cool art designs. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this or not. Postmortem on HBO has been doing this what did these look like scenarios for all these different items in the Halo universe. He's been essentially coming to the HBO forum and say, hey guys, anybody who's good at art, design what you think this item looks like in the Halo universe. And this week or last week or something like that, I don't remember. The Forerunner capital was the item in
cool.
question. And people came up with these really awesome mock-ups of what the Forerunner capital looked like, because it's not just like a round planet. It's weird. It's kind of like discs, and they all rotate into like different locking positions. And somebody came up with an amazing design for it. This was like a week ago. I'm going to see if I can find that now, because like that's a really cool thing. It's like you get this awesome mental image of what you think it looks like, and then somebody else who apparently has a much better imagination than I do like comes up with a way better design. I'm like, oh yeah, shit, that's what the Forerunner capital looks like. That's awesome. I'm gonna find that now. But very, very the book ends on a really dire note. It kind of comes out of nowhere, because like no one really knows about the Flood. Like that, like I guess like the higher elements of Forerunner government, or at least that's what it comes across anyway. Like it feels like the general populace has no idea about the Flood. Like it's just not.
It's very hush hush.
Yeah, absolutely. And then all of a sudden, this is the tipping point when Mendicant Bias shows up, and then all of a sudden everyone knows. It's like, holy hell, this situation has been happening right underneath our nose, and a bunch of Halo rings go missing, some of which are destroyed in the process. And for anybody who reading or listening to this, there's more than the 7 Halo rings that the games have told us exist.
Well,
apparently there was a bunch.
There were more. There were 12 originally.
Yeah, there were 12, and those were different rings. Those were different ones entirely, at least according to my understanding. Those were much bigger rings, and apparently those all get destroyed over the process of the books. And then it's in book 3 when the arc the arc that we're on in Halo 3 creates the smaller Halo rings, the ones that we know. And apparently those are also significantly more powerful. One of the things I would love to find out that I haven't is what is the timeline of events from the end of Cryptum? Like, what is the timeline from the end of Cryptum to Primordium to Silentium? Like, because Nevin, you read Silentium, it jumps back and forth,
Yeah.
right? Like, yeah, there's sequences that, there's a chapter, 10,000 years ago, now, 10,000 years ago now, that goes back and forth. But I guess Primordium is rather shortly after Cryptum. It can't be too far after, maybe a few weeks or months at most. Definitely have to give enough time for Bornstellar to transform into Didact physically. But I would really like to know how much time progresses in that. That'd be interesting to know.
Yeah.
But the end of Cryptum ends with this is the Forerunner war against the Flood is now in full swing. This is kind of the beginning of the end.
Right.
And a very depressing ending. It was really, 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 really good. But it ends on a very serious note, and it does something that none of the Halo games have ever really been able to demonstrate. It finally starts to demonstrate the scope of what the Forerunner Flood War was. It just kind of finally starts to show you, wow, this was really big. All the Forerunner, or all the Flood events that we have in all the Halo games. They've never really been that big outbreaks. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, hey, there's a few on this Halo ring. There's a few hundred or a few thousand. Oh, we had to glass half of Africa because that was infested. Oh, this shows this is a galactic thing. This is trillions and trillions and trillions of infection spores of bodies. And it really gets big.
That's what she said.
Damn it! That was in my. Yep. Nice one.
I do what I can.
Gosh. So a couple of interesting things during this whole kind of breakout, though, is Bornstellar was initially called to this capital city because he was going to testify against the Master Builder.
Yeah.
For what he overheard, and then that's when Minikin Bias comes in with this rogue Halo ring, and then Minikin Bias actually takes over. Trying to take over all the Halo rings, but he only manages to take over 5 of them. And doesn't the Forerunners try to activate all the slip space portals to get the rings out of there, the remaining rings? I originally thought that's where the 7 came from, was the 7 that Minikin Bias was not able to take control of, and the Forerunners actually managed to get them out of there. But
that's a detail that is addressed in Silentium.
Oh, okay. See, I haven't read that yet.
Yeah, so the rings that escape. Now, I think that it definitely, that might have been a plot idea that changed last minute. That's why they kept the idea, or maybe it's just hey, Bungie likes 7. Hey, we'll also like 7. I'm fairly certain that was just a plot detail that changed last minute, though. Those rings were made in the greater arc. There are 2 arcs for anybody who didn't know. The arc that we find in Halo 3 is the smaller arc, and that thing's huge. Imagine one that's even bigger. Well, the bigger one, the main arc, is the one that generates the Halo rings that are in these books, right? And apparently they have a limited. Apparently they're huge. They're much bigger than the Halo rings that we know from the games. Apparently they're 3 or 4 times the size of them, but they're also less powerful, if that it makes sense. And apparently over the course of the next few weeks or years or months or whatever, however long it takes for them to get from Cryptum to Silentium, they find a way to make Halo smaller and more powerful.
Huh.
Yeah, well, I think the main thing wasn't it that the big ones only fired directionally, and they were also physically a lot less stable? And so then they developed the smaller Halo rings, which could fire in these sort of outward moving waves, so that you didn't have to point it at a single target. It would just burst outwards and hit everything. And they were also structurally much more durable because they weren't it wasn't as giant a frame.
They weren't so big. Yeah, that may have been it. I don't necessarily remember the detail about them being directional, because like the Halo ring and Halo 3, the replacement ring, I guess it's not necessarily directional, but like I don't know, maybe because like I know the ring that was used at Fawn Hakor, that was like a ring set on the low setting, right? Apparently they have settings.
Yeah.
I would kill to see what that dial is.
It's like, just a big red dial with low, medium, and high, or something like that.
Low, medium, high, extra crispy, and it's that'd be interesting to see. Like I kind of imagine like Zap Brannigan sitting at the control and.
Gosh, you have to throw the Futurama reference in there.
Well, there was an episode where Zap was lighting up a laser to cut like a ribbon or something, and he ends up destroying like an entire space station. And that was the whole. He's got like this laser. It's like low setting, high setting, medium, ultra crispy or something. I don't remember what it was. So stupid.
Wow. But yeah. So what happens at the Capitol? All hell breaks loose when the minute Bias shows up. Pretty much everyone's wiped out there, but Bornstellar and the other Forerunner that was with him.
I imagine
Splendid.
A handful of others. I mean, they just.
Well, I mean, there was a warrior servant there that basically took them to their escape pod, and they escaped through one of the subspace portals that were trying to evacuate people, and the place they landed up was the Ark that we see in Halo 3.
Yeah.
Which turns out to be where the librarian's currently
hanging out at. Yep.
Yeah. So, and that's the official introduction of the librarian in person. Throughout the book, it's scattered that there's influences of the librarian happening everywhere. One of the reasons why Chakras and Riser were kind of infused with the chant that would activate the Cryptum, even though they weren't aware that they were actually singing or chanting anything. So the librarian, of course, putting lots of things in motion that no one really knew about. And then, like you guys said earlier, when Bornstellar meets the librarian, he's like, there's my wife, not there's the Didact's wife. So you see at this point that the first mutation is pretty much complete at that point. There's still some uniqueness of him left in there. He still has some of his own thoughts, but the Didact, for the most part, has taken over.
I think he describes it, doesn't he describe it near the end there as Bornstellar is nothing but a drop in the bucket that is the Didact, like he's still there and he's still preserved, but he's just so small by comparison that just because the Didact was so much older and so much more experienced and has so many more memories that there's just no real comparison.
Yeah. So what was it you was saying earlier about Greg Bear being really good at like that last page details, just that last paragraph that really hits home? I think that's one of the big things about Cryptum is if you read that last paragraph, holy hell, that like blows your mind.
Should I just read it now?
Yeah, go for it. So like this is a moment where Bornstellar is getting like another flash of the Didact's memories, and he's seeing the memory of Didact meeting the Precursor for the first time.
Right.
And like one of these really like there's like this little side detail that was mentioned when the Precursor spoke to the humans. Apparently some of them were so disturbed by what they heard, they just committed suicide. They were like, yeah, we're done.
Yeah.
And the thing was in prison. Like it was talking to them from it couldn't even get to them, right? And it scares them so badly that they're like, okay, all right, that's it. I'm done because this thing and whatever, this thing exists. Done. And
well, it was like forbidden for people to go anywhere near it, right?
Yeah, they locked it down after that. They were like, okay, the ones who did not commit suicide saying, okay, nobody is talking to this thing. We're locking it away. Like it's already like it already has its own lock. We're going to put our own lock on top of that lock.
Yeah.
We are making sure nobody gets to this thing, and apparently it doesn't work. But it is a scary, scary thing. And yeah, if you want to go ahead and read that last chapter, that last paragraph, like that, it's kind of scary.
Right. As I contained the essence of the Didact, the Master Builder must have suspected the value of the two humans, and so I hope that he had not killed them, but hidden them away where only he might find them again if he still lived. Somewhere in the humans' awakened memory lay our last hope of defeating the flood, which was even now ravaging world after world, system after system, more hideous by far than it had been 1,000 years before. More sophisticated, more devious, more vital, and soon to acquire a new master if we did not act quickly, if we did not locate the lost installation and the former captive. 10,000 years ago on Tarum Hakor, before I resealed its cage, this is what the captive had said to me, speaking in ancient Dagon, which it had to have learned from our far-distant ancestors. We meet again, young one. I am the last of those who gave you breath and shape and form millions of years ago. I am the last of your kind. I am the last of those your kind rose up against and ruthlessly destroyed. I am the last precursor, and our answer is at hand.
That's some scary stuff. I'm sitting here looking at the Kindle version of it right now, and apparently like 100 or so people had highlighted that last paragraph. Start we meet again, blah blah blah. So so pretty much it is the memory of Didact meeting the Precursor 10,000 years ago at the very end of the human Forerunner War. So what had happened was on that planet Tarum Hakor, there was this big battle that lasted 50 some odd years. And it was the final stand of humans against the Forerunners. Apparently that was the last planet that they, even though it's not their home planet, it's not Earth, it was apparently their last military planet, I guess, it was like kind of like their last base. And there was a lot of precursor technology on that planet, which I guess is why they found it to be such a valuable planet. And eventually Didact and his forces are able to defeat these humans. Comes at a pretty considerable cost for Didact, as all of his children are killed in this battle. And that's kind of like one of the things that's definitely a big motivator for Didact later on in Halo 4, why he doesn't like humanity is, well, they're responsible for the death of his children, plus humans, he just thinks humans suck in general, right? And there's more stuff in Silentium that eventually, like, I think Didact is such a weird and complex character because he's a good guy. He just does bad stuff, but for a really good reason, right? There's this moment in Halo 4 where I'm sitting there thinking about, like, what he's doing, and I'm like, Didact is kind of right. It sucks when he's like, oh yeah, he's trying to kill all humans. It's like, yeah, I can kind of see where he's coming from though. Like, you know what I mean? Does that make any sense? Like, Halo 4 is Didact's journey to, like, build an army. Because how the librarian stops him in the Halo 4 terminals? She stops him essentially from using the rest of the humans to build his anti-flood army. He's just picking up where he left off 100,000 years ago in Halo 4. He's just building an army and making more Prometheans. And, he's such a weird character because he's a good guy and he's a bad guy. He's a good guy. He's a bad guy, right? He's just so many weird things back and forth. But this last paragraph here, it clearly left an impression on Didact because it freaks him out. He spends the next 10,000 years freaking out about that.
Right.
Well, I love the implications of it too, as for us as the reader too, because through the whole book, every time there's any vague description of the Precursor, and his ability to drive people crazy just by talking to them and all this stuff, I'm thinking, man, this sounds a lot like a grave mind. Like, this really sounds like a grave mind. I'm pretty sure it's a grave mind. And then to find out, oh, so it's a precursor, but I'm pretty sure it's still a grave mind. So yeah. They're the same thing. Like, that's a big, like, what the fuck moment, right? That's a really...
That was a sticky moment, too, because it's like, we had to wait a year for Primordium to come out and to finish up that answer. And then we had to wait more than a year we had to wait like a year and 6 months because didn't Silentium get delayed?
Yeah.
Wait forever after Primordium come out to get the rest of the answers regarding that. And it was like, oh my gosh. Still not as bad as the 6 years in between Ghost of Onyx and Glasslands, but...
Yeah, or, anybody waiting for Half-Life 3.
Yeah.
You know what? I think Half-Life is beaten by those guys who are waiting in between Star Wars Episode 6 and Star Wars Episode 1.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for a good Star Wars movie, by the way.
Yeah. That pretty much takes us to the end of the book, though. There's definitely lots of things that we can go into detail on. Lots of influences of the librarian, lots of going into detail how Bornstellar picked up all these different things and how he learned of the Didact and having all these memories coming back. But I think for the most part, getting the book covered is kind of what we wanted to do. So we're going to have plenty of other podcasts to talk about some of the finer details. And we may have one at the end where we just have a huge roundtable after we're done that we can just talk about the trilogy as a whole and how it impacts the stories of Halo. Because that's one thing we didn't get to touch too much on, was actually how the books impact Halo 4. So I'm hoping at the end of this series, come maybe the end of this year, after we get a podcast on Silentium, that we can go through and just dive into how the books actually affect the storyline of the game.
Yeah, well, Silentium is really where the line between the two gets really clearly drawn, right? So that's where
so many details are in Silentium. Like everything in Cryptum is 100% dependent on the last 50 pages of Primordium and all of Silentium.
Yeah.
Nevin, I don't know if you I know you got to run. There's this thing with Primordium where if we did a podcast on Primordium, let's call it the last 50 pages of Primordium podcast, because the first 150 pages are the most grueling thing I've ever read.
Yeah.
It's slow and boring, and it's nothing pushing forward the plot at all. And then all of a sudden, the last 50 pages, complete payoff every single page. It's like, it was perfect.
Yeah, it's like there's this love story. I'm going to save it for the other podcast. We'll talk about it then.
The last 50 pages of Primordium podcast.
All right. So, we're kind of out of time, guys. This went a little bit longer than we anticipated. But fear not. We will definitely revisit some of the topics in here in a later podcast. But hope you got the gist of the book out there. Basically, Bornstellar is a Forerunner that becomes a Didact, and there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. And it's the beginning of the downfall and the war. Get a little bit more information on who Mendicant Bias is and what's going on in the Forerunner civilization before they fall. So,
real quick,
interesting stuff.
Before we go, just a confusing detail that I've had a ton of people ask me: the Didact that we are fighting in Halo 4 is the main Didact, like the Didact, the grown-up Didact,
the Erde-Tyrene.
The Erde-Tyrene. Yes, thank you. Yeah. So that's something that people have asked me all the time. Just to clarify to anybody listening, the mean evil Didact that we fight in Halo 4 is the main Didact. We have not met Bornstellar Didact yet, assuming we ever do, because he does. Bornstellar is the one who activates Halo in the very end. Like the Didact from the terminals is from the Halo 3 terminals. That is Bornstellar Didact. Yeah, he survives that event. He somehow manages to survive lighting Halo. I guess he was out of range. So whether or not we actually meet him, we don't know. But the Didact we fought is, that's Erde-Tyrene. That's the original one. Just that was a detail we should have mentioned way earlier on.
Oh, well. I think we've talked about it on the podcast before, too. So I don't think this is the first time of us mentioning it. But don't want to keep these guys. So we're going to wrap it up. Thanks, everyone, for listening in. Please check us out for the next book whenever we get it out. We're going to be doing the Grasslands for the next one, and it's probably going to be late August or early September. So make sure you read that book if you haven't already, and we'll be talking about that one next when we do our next one of these. Quick plugs for all of our stuff. You can check us out on Podtacular.com, and if you have any questions regarding any of the stuff that we talked about tonight, any of the books, or any Halo-related information that we've talked on previous podcasts, or any Halo news that's coming out, don't hesitate to send us an email, submissions@podtacular.com, or use it via the green button on our homepage, or you can call our listener voicemail, 240-200-HALO. That's 240-200-4256. Leave a message about 90 seconds long. Yeah. You can also listen to us live. We broadcast every Thursday at 8 p.m. starting for the open lobby, and then we usually get to start running the podcast around 8:30, if not before then. And also make sure you check out our weekly events. We normally run Wacky Wednesdays on Wednesdays at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and sometimes we do Monday Night Matchmaking. But in light of the Halo 4 Global Championship, that is on hold. So Wacky Wednesdays every week, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Wednesdays. Big shout-outs to CruelLEGACEY, Bryan Newman, and E from Xbox for coming on and doing this podcast. I really appreciate you guys being here. You made this a lot easier for me, especially that I did a horrible job on recalling all the events of the books, so I appreciate it very, very much.
Great. You were getting some of the smaller details that I completely forgotten about.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of like Cryptum. I definitely like to think of like the big events as a whole. Like, some of the smaller stuff I just kind of tune out, especially for morning. Like,
I was thumbing through the pages as we were going through the podcast. I'm like, okay, we're here. Okay, we're here.
You were doing really awesome. Like, you were just bringing back some stuff like I completely forgot about. I was like, oh yeah, they did that. Oh yeah, they did that.
So yeah, next podcast should be a little bit more organized for the book. So until then, definitely check these guys out. You can check out Nevin. He's CruelLEGACEY on Twitter, LEGACEY. He does the Playtime Show. You can check out Bryan. He does a lot of machinima stuff and is on a lot of different Halo websites. And of course, you can find him overdoing Xbox stuff and on Major Nelson Radio. So definitely check all of them out. And with that, guys, we are out for the evening. Thank you very much for tuning into this very special episode of Podtacular. Remember, it is our 8th anniversary, so we have come a long way, and we are still happy to be here. Here is to another how many years I decided to continue doing this thing.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
Thank you. Thank you. So until next time, guys, keep on fragging mendicant biases and rogue AIs and all those precursors that want to destroy all of us.
Blue team, got it.
All right, guys. Peace.